fourth webinar in our 2026 Women in Leadership Executive Speaker Series, with this one titled Leadership Levers, Driving Women's Career Progress. I'm Dr. Susan Matson, the founding director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project and the Extension Professor of Leadership at Utah State University. And I'm the host and will be the panel moderator today. So this event does further the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents by first, producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research, second, creating and gathering valuable resources, and third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And thanks to our sponsors, of course, the Utah Women in Leadership Project and Utah State University Extension. As I always do, I'm just going to jump right in. I'm so excited to have three guests today, and actually all three of them are my good friends. So thank you for joining me today. It is awesome. So what I'm going to do is, and if you have questions along the way, you can put them in the chat. That'll go to all four of us. So we'll be able to see them, and the panelists may want to just respond directly to you, but I'll bring those in as we can in our conversation today. So for each of you, I'm going to start with Nancy, and then Nancy, I'm going to ask you a question, and then we'll go to Lindsey, and I'll ask you the same question. So let me give the question to all three of you so you can start thinking about it. Here it is. When you look back on your own career, what intentional strategies or pivotal decisions most influenced your trajectory? I know there's so many things that you could think about, but just think about one or two things that people are on here to get advice and get inspiration. And so think about that. So Nancy, let me go ahead and start with you. Nancy Sylvester is a trusted legal advisor with over a decade of experience guiding organizations and governmental entities through complex employment law, regulatory compliance, policy, and safety and security matters. And as counsel at Ogletree Deacons, she partners with HR leaders and executives to navigate workplace challenges, mitigate legal risk, and foster inclusive, compliant, and high-performing environments. I love that word at the end, high-performing environments. And you can do that while also being inclusive and compliant. Right, Nancy?
Yes.
So Nancy's career includes leadership roles at Utah State Bar, General Counsel, and the Utah State Courts, Associate General Counsel, where she advised on attorney and judicial ethics and governance and safety and security and access to justice initiatives. Known for thoughtful leadership, and I firsthand have seen this on workplace culture, ethics, and innovation, she has developed training for judges and legal professionals and presented at conferences, law schools, and community forums. So she's active in community advocacy and serves as pro bono counsel for the We Believe Foundation and co-leads, thank you, the sexual harassment and gender-based discrimination spoke of a bolder way forward. So Nancy holds a JD from Southwestern Law School and a bachelor's in modern languages and literature from California Polytechnical State University. A mouthful, all of that.
It's a mouthful,
Nancy,
yeah.
go ahead, answer that question.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and that introduction. I really can't believe that I'm here and part of this prestigious panel. I think I still feel like a little kid sometimes. But certainly that goes back to kind of the beginning of my career. So I'm from California originally, in case you didn't get that from my background. And we moved here about 14 years ago. Again, at a time when the economy was not great. And there's been times when I've talked to people about career trajectories and gone, you're going to be fine because the economy is good. Well, right now it's a really hard economy, and women especially, I think, are losing jobs due to AI and things like that. And even mid-level career people are losing jobs. And so kind of take this with a grain of salt, knowing that this is slightly from a different era. But when I came here to Utah, I had a little 2-year-old. That was a challenge in and of itself. My husband was also working in the automotive industry, but I just graduated from law school. I knew nobody in the legal profession, and I thought, well, the only way to get my feet wet is to jump right in. So I went and volunteered at a domestic violence shelter, just offering to do some grant writing for them. And then they hired me probably like a month later as a domestic violence victim advocate. And that was probably one of the hardest years I've ever had in my career. It's just a lot of trauma and learning. And again, I didn't know anybody, but I got my feet wet in the legal profession, and I did was showing up to court, on a regular basis and getting to know prosecutors. But after about a year, I thought, okay, I think it's time to move on, because I had studied and passed the Utah bar in addition to the California bar. And so a job opportunity came up at the Utah Supreme Court, and I thought, and it wasn't an attorney job, even though I had
Oh,
passed 2 bars at that point. It was a secretary job. And I thought, well, what the heck? I'm just going to jump in again with 2 feet and see what happens, because it feels like that's still part of what, it's at least going to get me in there. And what other opportunities to work at the Utah Supreme Court would you have? And so I threw in my resume, and sure enough, they called me, and I said, I'm overqualified. I've even heard this from other people. And they said, we don't care. We like that you even applied to this as an attorney. And so once I got there, I was working in the Chief Justice's chambers, and because I had a JD, my position, I was able to get it to more from like purely administrative to more kind of involved in a lot more of the legal things. And that actually ended up becoming a model that they used moving forward to bring in more
oh.
legal help for the Utah Supreme Court. So it's because
So
I kind of took that.
in terms of your intentional strategies or the pivotal decisions, I'm hearing that it was like jumping right in, starting
Yeah,
to volunteer, just making things happen,
yeah.
and then it comes, correct?
It does. And I um I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm working on not doing that so much, because that can be a professional liability. And I made really good relationships wherever I went. I
Good.
really embraced who I was working with. I was kind of the party organizer at the Supreme Court, and so I'd always get the clerks together,
Good.
and we'd do fun things and go to lunches. I was so broke. They were paying me so little money, and I was supporting, by that point, I think, a family
That's
of
good.
four on about $1,800 a month. It was doable at that time, but it was also
Right.
just unbelievably hard. But yeah, but then after that, after about a year in that position, I was able to move on to the
Great.
general
And
counsel's
we'll
office.
talk a little bit more about some of your others as well. But that is great advice to get us started. Lindsey, I'm going to move on to you and do a quick bio, and then we'll move on and have you answer that same question. So Lindsey Lewis is Managing Director and Chair of the American College Center for Women in Financial Services, another mouthful, where she leads groundbreaking research, advocacy, and initiatives to advance women in the financial industry. With a career dedicated to empowering women and reshaping the wealth management landscape, Lindsey spearheads the center's Women Working in Wealth platform, including podcasts, social media, and exclusive events that foster community and professional development. She is a recognized thought leader, which I know well. She has been honored on Investment News 40 under 40's list and named Female Trailblazer of the Year. I love that so much, reflecting her impact on the profession. So she holds dual degrees in personal financial planning and an MBA from Utah Valley University. Her work champions diversity, equity, and inclusion, ensuring women advisors and clients alike have the tools to thrive. So passionate and visionary, Lindsey continues to drive meaningful change across the financial services. I love that you're so passionate about financial services. So question to you, looking back on your career, what intentional strategies or pivotal decisions really got you on the trajectory that you are on?
Thank you so much for having me. I think part of the intentional strategies that I set was similar to Nancy's, but it is like going into the rooms and kind of being there and being present. There was an amazing YouTube talk by Reshma Shujami around imposter syndrome, and she, questions if imposter syndrome even exists and that it only exists because we give weight to it and that it is the quote unquote bike face. So once you do your little homework and watch it, it's the bike face of today for women that are, self-selecting out or saying that I'm unsure if I deserve a seat at this table. So one thing that I have always subscribed to is that mindset of if I have an invitation or if I'm in the room, I deserve to be there.
Mm,
There are, if there are not enough seats at the table, we'll make another table or bring up more chairs. Really just taking that initiative and having that focused future mindset. The other part I would say is really how you talk about yourself to
mm,
others and how you talk about yourself within like interviews. I think one of the most valuable advice I received in my undergrad or in my MBA, we were talking about getting jobs post graduation, and I kept using the term girls, like I'm the only girl in the
oh,
class and I'm
yes.
the only this. And my professor is a man, and he said, you never refer to yourself as a girl, you refer to yourself as a woman. So frequently, that's like a microfeminism that I still hold on to today, is that I'm referring to myself as a woman and different women within the field. So I think there are little subtle shifts that you can make, right? Referring to yourself as a woman, rechanging the mindset of I deserve to be here. If you have a brain and capacity and the intellectual ability, you absolutely can do any job that any gender person can do, right? And so it really is that
Love that.
mindset. And because I grew up with six brothers, no sisters, I've always like rolled my sleeves
We're
up
the same
and
in that.
we
We're
are
the
the
same.
same. We also are very similar on our strength finder. So
Oh,
this is why we're
really?
we're
Okay.
kindred spirits. But really it is about having that mindset, that intentionality, and um also just like asking for what you want. I
Yeah.
think those are some pivotal
Oh,
things that
thank you.
have helped me along
Well,
the way.
it helps if we're aware of what happens and sometimes what women tend to do because we're socialized that we don't often belong in the room that when we're intentional, it's amazing how we can change. And people feel like we're supposed to be in the room. We need to feel like we're supposed to be in the room as well, and we deserve that. I love that. Emily, we haven't forgotten you.
Oh, I
Emily
know.
Rushton.
Hi.
Emily is the president and managing director of Waterstone Human Capital USA, where she leads the firm's U.S. operations and culture-driven executive search initiatives. A seasoned leader in recruitment and organizational growth, Emily previously founded Hire Integrated, one of Utah's most dynamic recruiting firms, which was then acquired recently by Waterstone just last year. Her career began at Robert Half, where she earned national recognition as a Chairman's Club honoree and later included senior leadership roles at Search Group Partners and Prince Harrelson and Associates. Emily has partnered with global organizations including Goldman Sachs. I love this list. Goldman Sachs, Netflix, Morgan Stanley, Henkel, Consumer Foods, and Sutter Health, helping them attract top talent and showcase workplace culture. And she's been recognized as Utah Business's HR Innovator of the Year in 2024 and one of Utah's 40 under 40. And she also serves on the NACD sponsor advisory council and the American Heart Association of Utah Executive Leadership Team Board. I love that. I love all of that. I love that you're in such different areas from finance to now, to law, and then now to this recruitment in companies and really consulting and so forth. So, same question again. What are some intentional strategies or pivotal decisions that really influenced your trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, Susan, I'm going to back up almost 20 years ago in my career. It was there at Robert Half International. I had a manager told me early on I was good, but I wasn't great, and there was a recession coming up, and he didn't want to have my name be on the list of people that could be impacted by a future layoff. And that I didn't even know what a recession was, but I cried. I went home. I was scared. I was like, I don't know if I can do this. And I made the decision early on in my career. I'm just going to show up. I'm going to do everything I can. And if it's still not enough at the end of the day, then there's nothing to cry about. And it worked really well in my favor. It took me from being an average employee to President's Club and Chairman's Club and when you're in an organization internationally with 11,000 employees and you're in the top 10, you get a lot of attention, which probably brings me to the other pivotal decision I made. I had climbed the ranks and had progressed well in this sales type environment and decided in my late 20s to leave a pretty cushioned, reoccurring book of business and go into the world of entrepreneurship. And I've
Oh,
never looked back. So I'll definitely be able to bring the entrepreneur perspective today in all things. Thanks for asking and thanks for having me here, Susan.
well, thank you. That is a big choice to go to the entrepreneurship route. But a lot of women here in Utah are making that choice,
Mhm.
not just because of excitement about doing that, but because of work life stuff as well. So now I'm going to ask each of you different questions. But like, I'm going to ask Nancy the first question. If you're dying, Lindsey or Emily, anytime I'm asking Nancy to jump in and do a quick response or whatever, we could do that too. But I'm hoping to get some good perceptions or perspectives to the listeners on a variety of topics. So Nancy, let me go back to you. Where do you see the greatest disconnect between what organizations say they value about women's leadership and what their systems actually reward? That's a big question to have us start.
It's a big
That
question, and you're
culture.
you're asking
Yeah,
an employment attorney too. So,
yeah.
I love systems because I use them in my defensive companies, but I also recognize as a mother, one of the hardest systems is having to turn off um, the fact that you are a mother during the day, because I have teenagers now who call me, right, who need me. I also have kids who still are needing to be, picked up from school. Now, I have kind of a unique situation in that my husband and I made a very conscious decision early on, that he was going to stay home, and that's been extremely challenging for him, but we realized we needed somebody there. Now, again, we're not really in that economy anymore, so the calculation has changed, but also we had to make some strategic financial decisions when I was making so little money, but we saw, that especially working at the Supreme Court, that there was some opportunity that despite making so little money that I needed to explore. Now back to your, main question. One of the things that I have realized is I need to have a couple work from home days. And I feel like with these kind of return to work initiatives, it really is pretty punitive of parents. And so, because I bill about 40 hours a week, but that's not 40 hours of work. It's between 50 and 60 hours a week. And so that's that's stressful and challenging. But when I'm home, my kids know I'm available. My husband can chat with me and have those kind of sidebar conversations. And I can also be more available, for all the things that come up. The home fires need, they keep burning, right?
Yeah.
And so I really feel like this is something that I feel really strongly about it, that organizations can do really well by women if they do that. However, I also know that as an attorney, because I advise a lot of clients, that it just sometimes doesn't work for a lot of jobs, so I'm
Yeah.
really kind of
Yeah.
talking from a position of privilege of kind of this white collar type job where I have the ability to work from home, but I think there has to
So
be some flexibility.
I love that. And so what you're really talking about is if companies say that women's leadership is really important to them, and that means the pipeline of women's leadership is important. And that means, we have some flexibility. And so
Hmm.
if you say women's leadership is important, yet you have no flexibility and no space for women to actually do the work in all domains, so then that's not that's not the best. And but all of us know that people or organizations will say things that there's nothing below it, right? And what I love is to find an organization that has both of those. Lindsey, let's shift a little bit. What do you see as the most critical levers that accelerate women's career advancement today? You talked about this a little bit already, but I want to add one more piece to that question,
Yeah.
especially in Utah. So there's general things that are applicable, right? But we have a bit of a different culture here. So what are a few of your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have great male allies. I've said this in other conversations that we have. If we look at the distribution of power as it is right now, right, there are statistically more men that are in power than there are women at most organizations within this state. So I grew up here, I went to school here, I spent 6 years away, and I just moved back. So there are interesting aspects of moving away within a work culture that I experience that are different than a work culture here, right? But I have found that as you find champions within your organization, whether they're women, men, non-binary folks, that they will help advance you moving forward. And I think it's just little things, right?
And that's a
So
lever. You're saying
the
that's a lever.
one little lever, right, where it's like, if I'm going to be in a meeting and I know that I can have a male ally in there,
Mm.
if I articulate an idea, I would love for him to give me credit for that idea in that meeting. But you have to have a really good relationship with this person in order to have that dialogue. So one thing that I have implemented is that, like, within my current structure, there is an influential man, and I was like, hey, I would love for you to be my mentor. All I need is coaching on these three things. It's going to be 3 meetings that are 40 minutes long. I'll schedule them. I'll do all of that. So then I'm building this relationship with this
I
person. So
love
then when
that
I'm
you outline that. I love that you're saying this is what I need. If you'll do this for this
correct.
many, I don't hear that often.
Oh, yeah, you be very specific and very granular because mentorship for a lot of people is too nebulous or confusing. And they're like, this is going to be like a 7 year commitment. And I've had individuals within the state of Utah where like men would refuse to go to lunch with me as an individual woman because they will not do that in that dynamic, which is great. That's your belief system. Cool. So if you dial it into like, I need help with this, and this is the amount of time, um, this will be beneficial. So I think that's really tangible advice that anyone can take is to find someone within your organization that is 1 to 2 steps above you, that can be a sponsor. Really, what you want to happen is that your name and your work is being spoken about you when you're not in the room in a great way. And in order for you to be the top of mind for these folks, you have to start building that rapport and that relationship. So I think that is one really helpful thing that I have implemented. And so in order to advance women, I actually believe that we need all genders in order to help that. I have tried the approach of like women's only, that type of route. And it is not seen a lot of dividends from that within this ecosystem. So there's an amazing book called Likeable Badass. And so there's dimensions of like your authentic self and also within the systems and structures that you have. And I've found within this state, the state of Utah, it really is like building that deep relationship with some of those male allies.
I love that. And asking people to have that mentoring or sponsorship relationship, well, hopefully some of it'll just come because you're helping them. You're working on that. But asking, I always say, just make sure there's a connection and a relationship. Don't ask someone just on the spur
You
of the
also can
moment.
do like reverse mentorship, right? Like
Yeah,
there might be something
exactly.
that they need to learn, right? Like they don't know social media or they don't know how to,
Oh, it's
uh,
good.
I don't
Yeah.
know, make a Word document into a PDF. But I'm not joking on that one. But there could be like a reverse mentorship
Yeah.
opportunity. So there can be something that you can add to the relationship or the dynamic.
And
Yeah,
it
the
just
best mentoring I've ever had or coaching is just when I'm actually doing more work than they are because I'm working, I'm making them look good, but I'm doing the work that needs to get done. And then they naturally do it. So I love that advice. Thank you so much.
Susan,
Nancy,
if I
you want
can
to
jump
jump
in on
in?
that really
Yeah.
fast, I think when it comes to male allies, I had a mentor, a supervisor at an internship when I was in law school. And he was an older gentleman, and he said, I need you to understand something, Nancy. When you come to me, women think in webs and men think in boxes. So if you can bring a box to me, that is going to be so helpful. And that goes back to what Lindsay said about having some finite ways to be more mentored. I think it's just men really do tend to think more linearly than women. And I've had to force myself to think more linearly in order to kind of assert, my leadership and be recognized, right? Rather than the kind of like all over the place storytelling.
Yeah, thank you. And Emily, I was actually had this question for you later, but let's tackle it right now because it relates to men as well. So what role should men play in accelerating women's leadership? And in your experience, what does really good allyship look like from men?
Hmm. I've had some really good ones.
Yeah.
I've also, someone mentioned it, wore your heart on the sleeve early on and had to learn some things the hard way throughout my career. But what does really good allyship look like was the question, Susan.
Yes.
Man, I hate to double down on what Lindsay said, but I have found that particularly in the profession of recruiting, if women don't feel like they're perfect, they're not going to raise their hand. They're not going to go after it. And, I think that can scare men, right? If you're not coming at them confident, you're ready to take it on, like you're ready for the challenge. Um, it can question those around you's ability to really endorse and to push you along the way and kind of create this, manifestation of uh, limiting your potential. So I think a really good male ally is going to work
Yeah.
through that with you, right? Like,
And know what the research says about that and know that's how many women are socialized,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, and I think I've always been in a performance pay type of position. I'm getting paid based off of performance. So there are things, a lot of things, Susan, that we've had to talk about over the years in Boulder Ray Forward, where when you are in pay by performance type of positions, it flushes out a lot of the noise, right?
Yeah.
If you're contributing to an organization, you understand how to generate revenue and, bottom line contribution factors. It's really hard to go against that from a confidence standpoint, a contribution, and what you're bringing because results can, propel and to not have that recognized or supported,
Yeah.
it's really hard to go against. So a little bit of a different pathway there, but um, I do have to surround myself with men that I feel comfortable failing in front of.
Oh, okay.
That's been a lesson I've had
A
to learn
safe
probably in the
space.
second, yeah, safe space, right? Because I am going to make a mistake. I am going to screw something up like everybody does, but I need to know the man in the room, my boss, my colleague, whoever it is, we can talk through it, we can learn lessons, and we can move forward. If I don't have that agreement of safety, loyalty, communication, and things of that sort, I don't want to work with that person because I need to be
Mm,
able to fail with you just as much as I need to be able to win with you. And that's a commitment I have to make with everyone I'm in the room with if I'm going to go into business with them.
I love that. I was just actually on Good Morning Utah yesterday.
Of course
And
you were, Susan. Of
and
course.
the quick segment was about women and our disclaimers. So we are like, we're socialized to be this humble, like, and it looks different, than men, but we sweep away, oh, I didn't do that, or I was just lucky, or, whatever. And we think and we're used to doing it because that's what we see people do. Yet the research tells us that it makes us feel less than. And it definitely, like you were saying, brings us in front of other people to not be confident and not take responsibility for what we have done to succeed.
I feel
So
Well,
it's
really called out
interesting.
right
yeah,
now. That's how
yeah,
I
I was
started
gonna
this
say,
conversation.
yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the women have probably socialized those feelings on other women more so than the men, if
Well,
we're gonna,
mothers do undaunted because you see it come up even as young teenagers that that's what we're supposed to do. But so it's a habits that we have to break, and we need more of those role models to just do it differently. And as I said on there, I've said before, I said humility just means being teachable. It does not mean being small. You can be confident and humble at the same time. So I thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Nancy, I really, well, this happens in all industries, but we all face these barriers. And I wanted to ask you specifically just about one moment when you encountered a barrier, and it could have been interpersonal or a structural barrier, which we have, and what helped you move through it without losing your momentum? Sometimes you can. If you get hit with a good barrier, sometimes we can back up and lose momentum. But you, in your career, you kept going. So what? Give me your
But
thoughts.
yeah, I, gosh, I'd have to pick from some. Can I just go back and make a quick comment though
Sure,
on the,
sure.
making ourselves small? So Justice Durham, who I think you've either had on or you're about to have a
Next,
conversation with.
I think next
Yeah.
week or the week after.
So Justice Christine Durham was the first female justice of the Utah Supreme Court, and I happened to work with her, which was just the coolest thing. But I did some work, once I was in the general counsel's office, I did a lot of work on committees. And somebody one time we went to this bar event and they started complimenting my work, and I just got really sheepish and embarrassed and minimized myself. And it was Justice Durham who said, "You need to learn how to take a compliment." And I went, "Oh." So I took that has stuck with me. That was years ago, but that stuck with me that I just need to say, "Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that," and not say anything else to minimize it. So anyway, that's my advice. Don't minimize it. Just say, "Oh, thank you. Appreciate it," and move on. Don't try to
And
do anything else.
I just teach women just to say thank you and close your mouth.
Yeah,
Close your
close
mouth
your
right
mouth.
there.
Stop. Yeah, don't say anything else. So, but in terms of kind of those like those barriers, I've had a lot along the way, and I think that some early ones. I had somebody who worked against me when I was in a prior job. I won't mention it, even though it's going to be clear from the context. But decided just one day they didn't like me. And so, and I worked closely with this person, and I thought, I am very likable. I plan parties. I make friends wherever I go. What is going on? And I just was so stunned by this.
We want
But
to be liked.
I know. And so I really had to learn that. My husband coached me on this. He said, "You have to stop taking your personal life into work. You are there to do a job. You are there to make your paycheck and get the heck out of there." And so I literally, in response to this, I would just shut my door. Thankfully I had a door. And I just literally put my head down and I just kept doing the work, and I just plowed forward, and I go volunteer for things and raise my hand and say, pick me, because the more I had work on these other things, the less I had to work with this other person. And that
Interesting.
example right there is how I've been able to pivot every time something has come up in my job. Like, nope, my job is to do the job, and if it's not working, I am out there immediately looking for what's next. And by the way, I've got my last two jobs from LinkedIn. Just a heads up.
Oh, I love that. So we're talking about barriers, and Lindsey, I want to go to you and give you specifically head on a question about structural barriers. And there's some real truth to structural barriers, and I've written about those recently. But what do you believe are the biggest structural barriers still limiting women's advancement? And which of those barriers the organizations just need to fix, like soon?
Yeah, so I personally have experienced some of those structural barriers, but I'm also like, let me bring a sledgehammer type of energy because if I'm not going to do it, who else is? I have a young daughter, so if I can make her life better in the future, like absolutely, I'll take that head on. I think one that I experience and now I ask within companies is just how decisions are made. So one of the structural barriers that I faced was that I felt I deserved a raise. And decisions on raises were a consortium-based decision process, right? Versus at some other structures, it might just be your immediate manager and they get an approval, but it was consortium-based. And so and it also was unanimous consortium-based. So right, if I don't get along with one of these 10 people or 8 people, it's going to be much more challenging.
Yeah.
So, what I find with some structures of companies here within this state is that they might have interesting ways that they make decisions or structures or how they view pay or, those different systems. I think what's important, like you mentioned with like leader humility, is to be teachable, but also to ask the questions. I think that there have been times in my career where I was afraid to ask the questions or to push back or, to be just have concern, and now I just ask the questions. I think that's what's really important. And I think it really is important to understand how decisions are made. Why many women end up creating their own enterprises and things like that is typically due to, strategic decisions and how decisions are made. And so, like I want to work from home or I need work-life flexibility or time autonomy. Like this is one great aspect of the current role that I'm in is that I build my own schedule. So there are days where I might be working at 6 a.m. to 10, and then it's like after, after a field trip or something like that, right? So there are going to be barriers there. And there are some barriers that we can't control. There are structural barriers, systematic barriers, based on decades and centuries of data. But you can make little shifts or you can ask those questions. So those are some things that I have experienced. And I think and I saw it in like the Q&A, as we continue to get our voice and understand our worthiness, we've always been worthy. There's no question there. It's just the pop culture and the subculture and, all those different nuances is that, right? If you have the intellectual capacity and you're able to do the job, like women don't apply for jobs unless they have 100 to 110% of the job description versus male counterparts will apply with 60 to 70% of the qualifications, right? So just that shift of like, I have the ability to learn and grow and adapt. You've always been worthy. You always deserve a seat. You are equal in opportunity and abundance, right? So that's kind of what I subscribe to, but there are barriers that are in place, but it also is just like knowing them and you can acknowledge it and then move forward.
That's the more you know, the more you know that things are happening and you understand why and how they're happening or the reason for it, then you can be more strategic. I love that, Lindsey. So at least one more, Emily, for you, at the organizational level. So if you could like wave a wand and change one organizational practice that you've seen as you've worked with lots of different organizations. So what one organizational practice would really, if organizations would remove that or change it or add it, would really improve women's leadership, would really change things?
Well, the good thing about what organizations do to improve women and getting women into leaders, the changes they make actually improve the organization and the dynamics to everyone. So there's mutual alignment. Um, you know, before my firm was acquired, Susan, I called it higher integrated. And the reason why I called it integrated is because to me, business is personal, right? When people say, oh, this is not personal, it's just business. I don't really go for that anymore. Like every single minute of every single day, I'm deciding what gets my attention and what's the number one priority at that moment in time. And I guess I need to go. You're seeing a theme here from me. There has to be a lot of trust and loyalty as to where I spend my time and when I recruit a candidate, right? And am advocating for them into placement with an organization, I need to know that they're set up for success. And if a man or a woman or whoever says, this is what I'm doing with my time, it's critical. And if that means it's 2 o'clock on a freaking Tuesday and you're at the doctor's office with your child, the people around you need to know that you have the intelligence to assess your priorities, your workload, and you're pivoting and structuring things accordingly. And so this whole like pre-COVID era of going into the office and being seen 8 to 5.
Mm.
Again, Nancy, you mentioned it. Some organizations, it absolutely has to be structured that way. But even a dynamic within those organizations of saying, I need this time off. This is why it's important to me, and supporting those type of ability to juggle is important. The last thing I want to say, and then I'll toss it back to you because we're getting on time
Yep.
here.
Okay.
Susan, you teach your students just to say thank you. I think Lindsay is a prime example of like the results of asking really great questions. If you could just teach your students to ask really good, open-ended, curious questions, man, it's going to help them in their career just a ton.
And not surface level. Well, for all of us, asking those critical questions that are really
Mhm.
important, and people know they're important to you, and you really want those. I love that advice. So those of you joining, I'm going to open it up now. So send some notes either in the Q&A. Send any questions that you want. I still have plenty, but I want to pull in a few from the audience. So if you have got those, either put them in the chat to us or just put them in the Q&A as well. And I am watching time here. And one of the things I want to, now we've talked kind of at that structural level a little bit now. But I want to, I would actually like each of you, while we're waiting for a couple questions to come in, each of you comment on this. How can women advocate for themselves? So compensation or visibility or stretch assignment without feeling like they're overstepping or breaking social norms or whatever, we have a lot of things going on. So all of you have done that. You've advocated um, really for yourself, but sometimes we as women, if we feel like we're advocating for our families or other women or whatever, that helps too. But what advice? Because women worry, do I push too much? Do I not push enough? Where are we at that? So who wants to jump in first? Any of you? I want all of you to
Yeah,
answer.
I'll,
Go
oh yeah.
for it, Lindsay, please. I'd
Yeah,
love to hear it.
I think data always supports the advocacy. So do your own due diligence and research around pay. Um, if you can talk about, I mean, it is very much legal for you to talk about your compensation with others at majority of levels. So understand what your coworkers are paid. So part of like one advocacy story for me was I had a master's degree and professional designation and licensure, and I had a colleague who had the same job title as me who hadn't graduated college, and we were compensated nearly the same, right? When you look at it from a data perspective, at the time there were fewer than 2 dozen women who held the certified financial planner designation within the state.
Mm,
And the average compensation for someone was X amount of dollars. So if I go with that and I have the data behind it, it's not just me advocating. Also, what I think is really important and something that I do tactically is that I am keeping a note of the wins that I have, right? And so I have a document where it's like, remember that I hosted that client event and it went beautifully. Remember how I helped procure $100,000 of new revenue this year and how it went. And you're bringing that up to your leader or whoever is helping manage you on a consistent basis. So advocacy doesn't have to be this big thing all at once. It can be like,
oh,
hey, let's just celebrate this win together because we had this great event. And so when you have the data plus the results, then the advocacy is just simply like part of the equation and is something that you deserve 100%. And so I think it is like repositioning that along the way. And if you're willing to advocate for your child at a doctor's appointment, you can absolutely use the same skill set at your own work setting. I think where sometimes people ask, like, how did you become so confident? Confidence is a learned skill, in my opinion. And confidence is your ability to trust yourself. So if you exercise that trust in these little scenario situations, you can continue to build those confidence. And sometimes you'll be like, you know what, I didn't like that, but now I know I have data there. So that is where confidence comes into play for me, where it's like,
I
yeah,
love it.
like validation is for parking. We can go through
Oh,
this. We could go through this by understanding and trusting ourselves through a variety of different things and utilizing skill sets in parallel environments, right? Like coaching a soccer team, I can also coach someone within a professional setting. So that's how I
oh,
have
yeah.
looked at advocacy.
I have not heard the parking one. That's good.
Validation is for parking.
I,
Yes.
I like that. Emily, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, I take a, maybe a complimentary angle here to Lindsay's feedback, but I guarantee you at work, your manager has a problem they're trying to solve, an objective, a goal that they're headed towards. I mean, I think if we could bring the agreement, the terms of agreement to the conversation more structurally, Lindsay, just like you did with mentorship, right? Here's what you do when you take on a mentor. I think the same should be approached in how women position themselves for promotions, pay increases. If you go to your manager and say, here's where I'm at, here's what I want to be at, I need to know what you're working on and problems and objectives you have in the way. If I can contribute to removing those, or if I can play a part in that, do we have an agreement that that would warrant X, Y, and Z type of results? It takes away a lot of the ambiguity. It takes away the emotional distress of like, I feel like I should be paid this because of X, Y, and Z history. It's actually an agreement of how to move forward with the reward system in place. Again, I'm taking something really complicating it and simplifying it, but hopefully at least that
But that's
framework can get
great.
us in the conversation better.
But what both of you are talking about is us as women, oftentimes we're socialized not to be direct. And in
Mm.
Utah, we have a bit of a, passive aggressive kind of culture going here. But but I've found, and I'm very direct myself, as you all know. But what we know is when we step forward and get used to being more direct, it actually you get more done. You have more clarity. I think people respect you if you do it the way that both of you have been talking about. It's more respected. It's just something we don't do often as women.
But I think
Um,
we can, I mean, we can be direct with a smile. Do you know what I mean? Like
yes.
I find that humor is just a really helpful tool for that. And but I'll tell a quick story because I complained for years about my pay in my job in the general counsel's office at the courts. And eventually I think I got like 4 pay bumps, but it wasn't without a whole lot of lumps and bumps. And so one time we were hiring a replacement for the same person who had my job, and my boss asked me to look at, the job description to make sure it matched what we needed. And I saw the salary at the top and I just scratched it out and I wrote in what I thought that we should be paid and I handed it back to and so I didn't get a bump at that point, but he knew. And I had told him, I said, I can't, you need to know what my goals are here. I've got student loans I got to pay. I need to take care of my
Mm,
family. I like pay our bills. I want to put some money aside. And right now, this job is not helping me to do that. And I'm going to have to start applying for some other jobs because of that. And like I
mm,
said, I've said in other comments that, I took on a lot of stuff. Now that doesn't always pay off, but I took on work strategically for other people. And particularly, I took on work for people who were in high level positions, the
yeah,
judges who could go and advocate for me and, administrators, that sort of thing. So
but
I really, some
strategically.
strategically taking on work. Yeah. But also, ultimately I ended up getting poached away from the courts to go be general counsel. And at that point, when they offered me a much higher salary than I was making there, I went, sweet, somebody finally recognizes my value, you know? And so from there, because I had somebody to recognize my value, I've had no problem, you know, negotiating salaries after that. And in fact, at my last job, I negotiated a higher salary than the male who was being hired for the same job. And they had to bump him up to make it equal. And I found emails about this and I went, you're welcome. So yeah, strategic with a smile. I think, you know, direct with a smile.
I love it. It does take practice but you can start doing it with, smaller things and get used to it. Now, we've got some awesome questions coming up. I would love to have you three take a look at the questions you're seeing over in the chat. There's some in the Q&A too. There's too many for us to answer here, but I would love to have each of you maybe take one and answer it. Which one is, I know we're multitasking here. We're looking in the chat, we're looking at the
Yeah,
Q&A.
I've been ruminating on this one for a
Oh,
while, and
okay.
it's around working in a place where you have to regularly edit yourself or your communication style, and what parts do you want to suppress versus not. I have done that before, and I lived very unhappily.
Mm,
And life is short. So what I did from there is I continued to get more education so I could level up professionally and that I could, step out of roles that made me feel that way.
mm,
Also, really understanding and owning your authentic self. There were many times if people like look at previous pictures of me, or like I used to have dark hair and I wore different clothes, like that wasn't the identity that I wanted, but it was the identity that I felt like I needed in order to thrive in the environment that I was set in.
mm.
However, I have found much more success and much more personal happiness by not having to filter or edit or suppress these things. But luckily, I have found places that can foster that. And I think, like I mentioned, like life's short. I know it's a tough job market, but like in certain like demographic, like financial services, they are desperate for qualified women. So it's like there's going to be somewhere else, So I think it really is asking yourself what is most important to you, your personal happiness, and like the people that you spend the most time with. There's this amazing chart of like you spend the most time with like your parents and your siblings, and then it like ends up being your coworkers or the people you
Yeah,
spend the most time with for nearly 4 decades. And so if that is not like if you're not feeling comfortable in that environment and you don't want to endure that for 4 decades, like perhaps there are educational things or
yeah,
pivots or things that you can do. I know it's definitely tough out there. I grew up in an environment where like we grew up on, welfare and things like that. But I do believe that you can, you know, have education, grit, and then that community and that network that you build. It's really important. So I would say work towards a place where you don't have to suppress that part of your identity.
thank you. And I want Nancy and Emily, you to take on one, but I still want, we just have 5 minutes left. I still want you to have a more general question at the end. So let's go maybe pretty quick here. Emily, what question do you want to answer from the
Well,
chat?
there's kind of a theme here, right? The people that have supported me in the workplace have been men, and then another one that's opposite, where the women have supported. And I think the North Star for me that's been really helpful is my own personal board of advisors. These are folks that I know I can go to and I can just make sure I'm sane and have an actual conversation about the workplace outside of the workplace to get grounded. And they're expected to keep me in check and to bring perspective and advice. And I formalized my board of advisors into actually an advisory committee with companies I've founded in the past, and it's evolved over time, the formality of people I keep around me as my North Star. But there's a lot going on in the workplace. There's a lot going on in the world. There's just a lot. And a lot of times, if our manager is showing up in an off day, we're going to personalize it. And so, having those folks that can just remind you of positioning yourself so that you do feel more comfortable bringing your authentic self to the workplace as it's appropriate, and the lines and the terms of engagement, I think, are critical. So I hope,
I
Susan,
love that.
that helps with some of these comments
Yeah.
I'm seeing in chat.
I do, and someone made a comment, I think that we should all strive to be direct and kind.
Yeah,
We need more
Nancy. Yeah.
kindness
Yeah.
Yeah, good call
and
out,
respect
Nancy.
in
Well,
the
and that's,
workplace.
yeah, and that was in a comment as well, and I agree with that because that's that kind of direct with a smile. So, but I do think one of the ones I wanted to take on was the learning not to give away your whole self for free. Kind of two thoughts on that, and I've done a lot of that myself and really kind of undervalued my work. But I realized that I have to really kind of think of my time in buckets. The more I give away of myself, the less I have time, both for my paid work and also for my family. And so I've had to be a lot more cautious about that, especially with this kind of
Yeah.
more intense job. But I also will say that I have been a much more interesting person in interviews because of all the extra stuff that I've been doing outside. I am kind of a news junkie, and so I spend a lot of time on news, but I also follow, for example, like MWAG and what they're doing and all the latest on that. And not, and also obviously Boulder Way Forward. So I have my fingers in a lot of things, and I can sit and jibber jabber for hours about all of the things that I'm interested in, even to the point I've also become kind of this little like quasi UFO conspiracy theorist. And so in the
Oh,
right audience, I will talk to people about that.
I
So
love that.
just a little advice there.
Well, thank you. So we're almost done, and I need 30 seconds at the end. So 20 seconds for each of you. Here's my last question. When you imagine a future of women's leadership in Utah, a place really good for women in Utah, what gives you the most hope, actually? What gives you the most hope? Lindsey, let's start with you.
I really think this rising generation has much more skill sets and a different pop culture than previous generations. And I think that there can be coaching down and up, upstream, downstream. And I think that we are equipped, thank you, like Dr. Madsen and all the other people with amazing research and knowledge. And I think it really is about taking that collective effort and approach together. And that is how we move forward. I subscribe to the methodology of becoming a village architect and like Emily's board of directors, like looking at your all the dimensions of your life and pushing forward together. And so I'm really excited about it. I will say there's like a couple comments in there. You don't win every battle. So that's like what's going to
That's good.
happen. And there are going to be like things that don't work out, but sometimes you can lose steam or faith or momentum, but it is really about like dusting yourself up and like keep
Yeah,
walking
yeah.
forward because
Thank
even
you.
saying something or doing something really is in a small scale moving a needle.
Thank you. 10 seconds, Nancy. We're almost there.
I
10
can't do
seconds.
10 seconds. I'm so sorry. But Melanie Jones gives me a lot of hope. Susan Madsen gives me a lot of hope. I think the
Oh,
more that we see content online pushing on women's issues and having these discussions, that's what gives me a lot of hope is that the discussions are happening.
thank you. And Emily.
Just women unleashing their voices, their power. Once we continue to do that and understand the magnitude of it, it's impossible to stop that momentum.
Oh, I love that. Emily, Nancy, Lindsey, thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks to all of you for listening in. Just a little note, it is next week. We're going to have a webinar that is called Trailblazing Justice, a conversation with Christine Durham on women, leadership, and law. And then the following one on the 9th, we actually have a really unique one, Women Leading Behind Walls, Leadership in Utah's Correctional Facilities, which I think I'm really excited for that one as well. So thanks to all of you and you three panelists, and thanks everybody for joining today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.